Hey there guys, welcome back for another Mortal Realms Monday painting video. This week I'm going to show you how I went about painting the Draco line from issue 67 featuring Astreia Solbright. Now obviously she's a named character, but because I'm using her for the Celestial Vindicators, she will just be a regular whatever it is they call them, the mounted mages. But yeah, so obviously she'll lose the benefits of the whatever her special abilities are for her faction or storm host. But otherwise, gameplay wise, you could use her as either one of the regular mounted mage guys, or if your opponent is happy to do so, you could they could let you use her stats minus any special abilities, just to give her a bit more of a character feel. Anyway, I start this off. I am doing this as a bit more of an experiment. I wasn't entirely sure how this was going to turn out, but hopefully you guys will enjoy the video and the end result. So getting on with it, I'm first giving it an all over coat of corn red. I'm doing this over the Mephiston red as it has a slightly deeper, more pinkish tone to it, which is the look that I was going for this model. I didn't want a pastel pink that I've done with a previous model in the past. I wanted something a little bit more stronger, a little bit more realistic, so I thought I'd go with this more reddish pink. So anyway, give this an all over coat, obviously let it dry. I'm using the medium dry brush from the Army Painter, just because it covers really quick. You know, you could use a makeup brush or anything like that, but they're great for covering large areas at once, and then you can go back in and get into little details and stuff with a smaller paintbrush afterwards. But I'll get on with this and catch you guys back in a tick. Right, so once the corn red is applied, I'm now taking some Wazdaka red. This is a slightly more reddish, brighter paint, and as you can see, I'm wiping most of the excess off on a paper towel, and again using the medium dry brush, I'm concentrating it towards the pores, making sure that any large amount of paint is deposited down there, and then just feathering it and brushing very lightly further up the model. The aim I was going for with this was to get a slightly brighter as it comes down the model, with a brighter underbelly. It doesn't quite go end up like that, I will admit that, but we do end up picking out the muscle tones, and we do get a slight difference with the pores. But yeah, so all I'm doing is dry brushing over, like I say, starting at the feet, so if there is too much paint on the bristles, it will be in the area that I want it the most, and then working my way up the body, very lightly touching the body just to pick off those raised areas. With the lower half of the legs, I'm looking to get it into the recesses as well, so that it's more of a solid colour down there. But with the top half, we do want that corn red showing in those muscle definitions. Okay, so moving on to the next level of highlight, I'm now using some pink horror, and I've stepped down the dry brush size, as I'm just looking to pick out the muscle tones on the underside and the lower portions of the body, of the legs. I do move up slightly onto the body, as you can see, but very lightly, just to pick off some of those sort of top muscle areas. But the underside of the body and the lower the portions of the legs, again, I'm looking to get a little bit heavier. I want it to be that more pinkish flesh looking colour, whereas the outside is the more reddish area. You know, I'm just looking to get a tonal difference between the inside of the legs and the outside. The pink horror is more of a highlight on the outside, but on the underside of the body it's more of the main colour. Okay, and for the final layer of highlight, I'm just using a mix of 2-part pink horror and 1 part screaming skull. I use the screaming skull rather than the white, as it has a slightly creamier tone to it, so it's not going to brighten the pink up as much, or it won't mute it down as much. It will still keep its vibrancy a little bit. So again, very lightly now, just applying this to the paws and the underside, just making, you know, trying to pick off those sort of raised areas and leaving the pinker recesses. Okay, so just prior to this step, I applied an all over coat of Carroburg Crimson and forgot to hit the record button. So the model is slightly darker. The reason for the Carroburg Crimson is to get into those recesses, but also to pull the colours all together by sort of applying a slight shade over the top of the brighter areas. What I'm now doing is using the corn red again, just to go back over the top area, just to brighten that up slightly again with the dry brush, just to pick it all out, you know, the muscles and that, and pull it all back together. And once this step is done, the main body of the Draco line is done, and we can then move on to the details. Okay, so moving on to the details now. For the stones on the body is what I will call them, these sort of scale patch areas. I'm applying a base coat of pink horror. I want these to stand out a bit more than the body, so that they are different, but within the same colour range. So obviously we're going for a pinkish type body, and so it makes sense to have the brighter stones. So as I said, a straight over coat of pink horror, being careful not to get it on anywhere that we've already done, just sort of picking off the tops of each of these stones. Right, so next I decided to get all of the black portions done, just so that they were out of the way. So using some Abaddon black, I've gone in and decided to paint the claws and the sort of the spikes that run down the spine in the Abaddon black. I felt that this would be a good contrast against the pink tones. I also decided that I wanted to give him a bit of a feline type snout or nose, so I took the black and applied that to the nostrils and the front area, and then thinned down slightly and faded it off into the pink to give that fade back from black into the body. Hopefully you guys will like the result of that. At the end, I'm quite happy with it. It gives it a little bit more of a animalistic look, or sort of, you know, a real look, rather than having the nose the same colour as the rest of the body. But as for the black areas, it's basically the saddle, the straps, the claws, his nose, and the spine. Obviously this is thinned down black, so it's going to take a couple of layers to fully cover. But yeah, so I'll get on with this, and we'll be back in a bit. Right, so moving back to the stones, I'm now using a 50-50 mix of pink horror and screaming skull, and I'm applying this to the top portion, or the raised areas of each of the stones, just to add a little bit of depth to them, rather than trying to edge highlight around the rim of each stone, because some of these are so small you would end up just colouring the stone. I felt it's easier to colour the top portion as though the light is hitting them from above, and then as a lot of them are sort of pyramid type shaped, they tend to have this underside to them and a top side. So yeah, that's the way that I decided to do this. And then adding a little bit more of the screaming skull to lighten it up a little bit more, I then went in and added a little bit of a line highlight across the ridges that form the peak of the stones, where the light would hit the top half and then you would have the shadow underneath. I then put an edge highlight along that sort of ridge line. Right, so with the body now done, I can move on to highlighting the black areas, so all of the leather straps and the claws and the hair and things like that. So what I'm doing for this is using some Incubi Darkness, and as you can see, I am very carefully edge highlighting down both sides of all straps. God, I can't speak today. With this, edge highlighting, obviously, certain areas are easier to do than others. If you have a hard, large edge, such as the corner of a tank, you can use the side of the brush at an angle and just catch the edge of the tank. With something as small as these straps, if you were to do that, chances are the tip of your brush could end up hitting the body, and so we use I use the point of the brush to do that line. Now the problem with this is, obviously, if you push a little bit too hard, the bristles will spread a little bit and you'll end up with a thicker line. The way to overcome this is not worry about making that thicker line. All you have to do is carry on lining, go back to the black, and then paint down the center, so essentially a third line but in black down the center of the strap, and just basically thin out the initial mistake that you made with the Incubi Darkness, or whatever color it is that you're edge highlighting, and then that will give it a finer edge highlight. And for the spine hair, or it's not really a mane, but we'll call it the spine spikes, you can see here I'm thinning down the Incubi Darkness quite a bit, and what I'm doing is applying this over the top 2/3 of each of these spikes. I'll let it dry and then layer it up, working back just a millimetre or so at a time with each successive layer, until I'm then doing, the top third point is being covered. Okay, and for the final edge highlight to the leather straps, I'm just taking some Funrician Grey, as it has that same bluish tone to the Incubi Darkness, and I'm just edge highlighting the tops of the straps, so anything that the light would hit from above, and as you can see here, down vertical edges. What I'm also doing is sort of staggering. I'm not doing a solid line across everything. I am staggering some of the lines to give them a little bit more of a broken up feel, and this gives the impression of the slightly worn chipped leather having a bit more of a textured surface that the light is catching. I'll then use the side of the brush, and without having too much paint on it, just brush across the tops of the spine spikes, just to give a little bit of a top highlight to each one. Obviously I'll make sure that I pick them all off, even the smaller ones, but I'm just trying to get that sort of edge highlight on the top of each of the spikes, just to brighten the spikes up a little bit. I'll then do the same for the claws, and also the rim right around the edge of the nostrils, just for a little bit of highlight there. Now you can see there that I touched my finger to the paint. All that was, I applied a little bit too much, so whilst it was still wet, just touch it and it pulls off. Now I'm not putting straight down, I am putting a bit of a smudge, otherwise it would leave a fingerprint there. The smudge just stops the fingerprint mark and removes some of the paint. It doesn't dry quick enough to leave the paint on there, so I can remove the excess like that quickly enough. So coming to the final few details now. I've taken some iron breaker and a slightly older paintbrush just so that the metallic doesn't ruin the brush as much. I'm applying this to all of the buckles, straps and rings on the not the straps, the buckles and the rings on the straps that attach the the emblems. The emblems themselves will be gold, but the attachment rings and the buckles I want in the iron breaker. Next up, I'll take some Retributor armor and go in and paint all of the gold details. For this I wanted any of the meteor pieces, such as the piece on the cheek here, the one on the front of his chest, and the lightning bolts, things like that, done in the Retributor armor. Now one thing I will point out whilst doing this model is you'll notice that I'm not painting the saddle area or the rider. That's because I will do that off camera. You've seen me do that enough times. For this one I just wanted to show you an alternative paint scheme for the Draco line, but you can paint the rider at the same time as doing this, but I would recommend leaving the rider off as I have done, just to make it easier to get to the spine and the body that would be covered by the rider's cloak and legs. Paint the rider up separate and then glue her on once the painting's done. Okay, and finally I'm just taking some white scar and painting in the teeth. I will also dot in the eyes and put a small dot of Incubi Darkness in for the pupils within the eye, and then I will use a very small amount of the white scar with a little bit of the Fenrisian Grey. As you can see, I'm mixing up here, and I will use this as final edge highlighting on the straps in a very broken up method. I don't want any harsh lines on this. These are very they're for weathering, to, like as I said earlier, with the texture of the strap. I just want that texture to be shown with this final highlight. And once that is done, that will be the model done. As I said, the rider paint up separate. Also you'll notice that although he's attached to the base here, I've not glued him down. To paint the base, I will actually varnish the Draco line with a matte varnish applied by brush. I will then remove the model once that's dry from the base, paint up the base, apply a varnish to the base, and then glue the model back into place. So that way I'm not getting paint on the model. I can reach all the areas of the base, and the reason I varnish the model before removing it is that I will obviously have to apply a little bit of pressure and grip to be able to pull it off the base, and I don't want my fingers rubbing away the paint. So by applying the varnish, it gives it that layer of protection. I can then pull it off the base, and then once the entire model is complete, I'll give it a once over with one more layer of varnish, just to add that extra layer of protection. But that is the end of the video, so we're going to jump over now, have a look at the finished model, and I'll catch you guys in a flash. Right, and there she is, guys. One Astreia solbright, painted in Celestial Vindicator's colours with a pinky purpley Draco line. So as always, guys, thank you ever so much for joining me. If you enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button. If you're not yet subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button and supporting the channel. If you are recently subscribed and new to the channel, then a big warm welcome to you. And if for any reason you have any negative feedback, I do appreciate negative feedback as long as it is you know, done in a constructive way. So if you want to leave a thumbs down, by all means do that. Leave a comment also. Let me know how I can improve on my videos. I am wanting to obviously become a bigger channel, and so the only way I can do that is by knowing what I am doing wrong and right. But yeah, until next time guys, thank you for joining me. Take it easy and keep painting those minis.